The air hung heavy with the scent of lilies, their oppressive sweetness a stark contrast to the cold, metallic tang of blood. It was a scent that would forever be etched in Amelia's memory, a macabre reminder of the day her world crumbled. She stood amidst the carnage, her stomach churning in a desperate attempt to expel the breakfast she'd enjoyed just hours ago. The once vibrant garden, a testament to her mother's love and meticulous care, was now a scene of unspeakable horror. Her mother, her beautiful, vibrant mother, lay sprawled on the patio, her lifeless eyes staring blankly at the sky, a single crimson blossom adorning her pale cheek. A blossom that had once graced the very bush that now bore witness to her brutal end. A low growl, guttural and chilling, sliced through the silence, pulling Amelia from her numb stupor. Her gaze darted to the source of the sound, a shadow lurking beneath the vibrant pink blossoms of the rhododendron bush. It was her cat, Mr. Whiskers, or as she fondly called him, Whisk. His emerald eyes, normally brimming with playful mischief, were now narrowed, gleaming with an unsettling intensity. A single drop of blood, glistening red against his pristine white fur, marked him as the perpetrator. Amelia's heart lurched in her chest. It couldn't be. Whisk, her beloved Whisk, a creature of gentle purrs and playful nudges, couldn't be the one responsible for this unspeakable act. She wouldn't believe it. "Whisk," she whispered, her voice trembling, her mind struggling to reconcile the image of the sweet, cuddly creature she knew with a murderous predator lurking in the shadows. He didn't respond, only watched her with those predatory eyes, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Amelia cautiously approached, her steps hesitant, each one a battle against the overwhelming horror that threatened to engulf her. She knelt beside her mother, the familiar scent of lavender and honeysuckle that clung to her mother's clothes now mingled with the nauseating aroma of death. The memory of her mother's laughter, her gentle touch, her warm embrace, flooded her mind. A sharp pain, raw and brutal, tore through her chest. She wanted to scream, to let out the agony that threatened to consume her, but all that came out was a strangled whimper. Whisk remained motionless, his gaze unwavering as Amelia reached out to her mother's hand, her fingers tracing the lines of her mother's palm, the lines that had always held a sense of comfort, of security. They were cold now, lifeless. A sudden movement caught her eye. She looked up, her gaze falling on a tiny, white feather lying amidst the fallen petals. It was the same kind that adorned the rare, white dove that her mother cherished. Whisk had never shown any interest in the dove, but now the feather lay there, a stark reminder of the havoc Whisk had wreaked. Amelia's heart sank. It was too much. She couldn't reconcile the image of her playful cat with the horrifying scene before her. But something was amiss. Something didn't add up. The dove, a creature of peace and serenity, could never have been a threat. And yet, here lay the feather, a silent witness to the brutal act. She stood, her legs shaky, the weight of grief threatening to crush her. Her mind raced, desperate for answers. "What happened, Whisk?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why?" Whisk remained silent, his emerald eyes fixed on her, their intensity chilling. He was a creature she thought she knew, a companion she cherished, but now he was a stranger, a creature she couldn't recognize, couldn't trust. She glanced around the garden, her eyes scanning every inch of the pristine, manicured space, searching for clues, for answers. Her gaze fell on a single, crimson drop of blood, stark against the white marble of the patio. The color, the crimson hue, was strikingly similar to that of her mother's favorite hibiscus, a flower she'd planted with such care, a flower that now bore witness to her brutal demise. A wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled back, her mind struggling to process the reality of the situation. Whisk, her own cat, the one she'd trusted implicitly, had murdered her mother. The thought was so horrifying, so utterly absurd, that it felt impossible. But the evidence, grim and undeniable, spoke for itself. The single drop of blood on Whisk's white fur, the weight of the world felt as though it had been lifted from Amelia's shoulders. The truth, once obscured by grief and suspicion, was now as clear as the morning sky. The white feather, a symbol of peace and innocence, was the key. It had never belonged to Whisk. It belonged to the dove, A creature her mother cherished, a creature her mother had painstakingly trained to land on her hand. The dove had been her mother's confidante, a symbol of her gentle soul, and now it was a symbol of her demise. Amelia envisioned the scene in her mind's eye. Her mother, tending her beloved lilies, their fragrance heavy in the air, when the dove swooped down, alighting on her outstretched hand. The soft cooing of the bird, the gentle touch of its feathery wing against her skin, a moment of serene beauty disrupted by a sudden, horrifying attack. Her mother, caught off guard, had instinctively raised her hand, the dove flying away, leaving behind the single white feather that would become the linchpin of Amelia's investigation. The murderer, driven by a primal need, had struck, his fury and desperation leaving their mark on the lilies, staining the soil with her blood. The realization sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. Her mother's killer had been an animal, a wild beast driven by a savage instinct, its violence as shocking and inexplicable as the lilies that had been its only witness. But it wasn't Whisk. It couldn't be. The thought was a terrifying absurdity. The culprit was not a cat, but a creature far more dangerous, a creature that lurked in the shadows, its true nature hidden behind a mask of domesticity. The police, initially skeptical, were finally convinced by the evidence. The feather, the blood on Whisk's fur, the scent of lilies, the unnatural ferocity of the attack, everything pointed to a creature capable of such violence. The search for the killer became a race against time, a desperate attempt to prevent another tragedy. The answer came from an unexpected source, a neighbor, a quiet, unassuming woman who had a reputation for being a bit strange. She loved animals, they said, taking in strays, offering them refuge and care. Her name was Mrs. Hawthorne, and she had a secret that had been festering in her heart for years, fueled by jealousy and resentment. She had been obsessed with Amelia's mother, envious of her beauty, her grace, her love for animals, all the things she herself lacked. She had envied her mother's life, her happy marriage, her loving family, the very air that her mother breathed. The dove, Amelia's mother's beloved companion, was a constant reminder of all she lacked, a living embodiment of her mother's happiness. It had become the target of her bitter envy, the symbol of everything she could never have. Mrs. Hawthorne had, in a moment of unhinged rage, attacked her mother, her violence fueled by a hatred so deep it had consumed her soul. It wasn't just the lilies. The lilies were her mother's pride, a testament to her love for the beauty of nature. Mrs. Hawthorne, driven by her jealousy, had deliberately trampled them, defiling her mother's sanctuary. As Mrs. Hawthorne was led away, her face a mask of despair, Amelia felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had been unveiled, justice had been served, and the terror that had gripped her was finally fading away. But the peace was tinged with a profound sense of loss. Her mother was gone, her life cut short by a senseless act of violence, and Whisk, her beloved cat, the creature she had unjustly blamed, the creature she had so desperately wanted to protect, had been a victim of circumstance, caught in the crosshairs of a tragedy he could never understand. Amelia looked down at him, his green eyes staring back at her with a depth of sorrow that mirrored her own. He was still young, his playful nature dimmed by the recent events. He nuzzled against her leg, seeking comfort and reassurance. "It wasn't you," she whispered, stroking his soft fur. "It was never you." He purred softly, his body trembling slightly as if sensing her pain. He was her companion, her confidante, and despite the ordeal, his loyalty remained steadfast. He had been falsely accused, yet he had never wavered in his love and devotion. As she looked into his eyes, Amelia knew that her mother's love, her own love, and the love she shared with Whisk would not be extinguished. The memories, bittersweet though they were, would remain, a constant reminder of the beautiful. The air in the police station was thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant, a stark contrast to the sweet fragrance of lilies that had permeated her mother's garden just hours before. Amelia sat across from Detective Davies, the weight of the past few days pressing heavily on her shoulders. The truth had been unveiled, the culprit apprehended, but a profound sense of unease still lingered. Detective Davies, a burly man with kind eyes, spoke softly. "We've got Mrs. Hawthorne locked up. The evidence is clear, and she's confessed. He paused, his gaze meeting Amelia's. It's over, Amelia. You can finally let go. But Amelia couldn't. Even with the relief of knowing the truth, the world seemed irrevocably altered. The image of her mother, lying lifeless in the garden, haunted her, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The lilies that had adorned her mother's grave, a symbol of love and remembrance, now carried a bitter tang of betrayal. It wasn't her fault, Amelia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She was just jealous. Davies nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. Mrs. Hawthorne was a lonely woman. She had always been envious of your mother, of her happiness, her family. Her resentment festered until it boiled over. Amelia looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the faint outline of a scar on her palm, a mark from a childhood fall. The memory of her mother's comforting presence, the gentle touch of her hand as she bandaged the wound, flooded back. That love, that warmth, felt like a distant dream now. But what about Whisk? Amelia asked, her voice trembling slightly. He was there, near the body. He had blood on his fur. Davies smiled reassuringly. We examined Whisk. The blood belonged to your mother, but it was from her hand, not a wound. He must have licked her hand after the attack, getting some blood on his fur. We found no evidence of any attack from him, and besides, he's a cat. He's not a murderer. A wave of relief washed over Amelia. The guilt she had harbored for blaming Whisk felt unbearable, a weight she was finally able to shed. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small, worn plush toy, a cat with bright green eyes and fluffy, white fur. This was his favorite, she said, her voice soft. He wouldn't hurt anyone, especially not Mum. Davies chuckled. They are quite the creatures, aren't they? Independent, sometimes aloof, but deeply loyal to their humans. Amelia nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at the toy. Whisk, despite his aloof nature, had always been there for her, a silent companion through the good and the bad. He had been the one to comfort her after her mother's death, his gentle purring a soothing balm against the pain. Do you think? Amelia hesitated, her voice barely audible. Do you think Whisk knew? Davies looked at her, his expression unreadable. Knew what? Knew about Mrs. Hawthorne, Amelia replied, her voice almost a whisper. Knew about what happened. Davies remained silent for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. Cats are very perceptive creatures, Amelia. They pick up on things we don't even notice. It's possible he sensed something was wrong, something off about Mrs. Hawthorne. But whether he understood the full extent of the situation, that's hard to say. Amelia knew he was right. Whisk, with his keen senses and quiet observations, had probably sensed the unease that had enveloped their home in the days leading up to her mother's death. He was a creature of intuition, a silent observer of the human world. As she left the police station, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement, Amelia felt a sense of closure. Justice had been served, but the pain of loss remained, a constant ache in her heart. She held the plush cat toy close, a silent tribute to the loyal companion who had walked beside her through the darkness. The events of the past few days had taught her a valuable lesson. The world was a complex place, filled with darkness and light. There was an undercurrent of danger lurking beneath the surface, a potential for evil that could erupt unexpectedly. But there was also beauty, resilience, in love, even in the face of tragedy. As she walked towards home, she glanced at the garden, the lilies now wilting under the afternoon sun. She knew that the scars of the past would linger, but she also. The weeks following Mrs. Hawthorne's arrest were a blur of grief and a slow, arduous process of healing. Amelia found herself lost in a haze of sorrow, the weight of her mother's absence pressing down on her like a physical burden. The house, once filled with her mother's vibrant laughter and the gentle scent of lavender, now felt empty, its silence echoing with the phantom pain of loss. Whisk, as always, was by her side. His presence was a balm to her aching heart, his soft purrs a soothing lullaby in the quiet of her grief. He curled up on her lap as she sat by the window, watching the world go by, his emerald eyes reflecting the changing hues of the sky. He seemed to understand her pain, his gaze unwavering, his presence a comforting weight. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch swing, lost in memories of her mother, Amelia noticed Whisk staring intently at something in the garden. She followed his gaze and saw a small, brown bird fluttering around the rose bushes. The bird seemed hesitant, almost scared. As it perched on a branch, a white feather drifted from its tail, landing at Whisk's feet. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The feather. It was the same shade of white as the feather found near her mother's body, the one that had initially led her to believe Whisk was involved in her mother's death. But now, looking at the small bird, fear etched on its face, a chilling realization dawned on Amelia. The dove, her mother's beloved companion, had been scared, possibly even attacked by Mrs. Hawthorne, who had a deep-seated aversion to birds, seeing them as unwelcome intruders in her carefully manicured garden. The feather was not a sign of guilt on Whisk's part, but a piece of the puzzle that had been tragically misinterpreted. It was a testament to her mother's love for the dove and Mrs. Hawthorne's hatred for it. That realization brought a strange kind of peace. It exonerated Whisk, proving him innocent in her mother's death. It also revealed the depth of Mrs. Hawthorne's bitterness and her capacity for violence, hidden behind her facade of a sweet, harmless old lady. But it wasn't just the exoneration of Whisk that brought Amelia comfort. It was the growing realization that Whisk had known all along, that he had sensed Mrs. Hawthorne's malice, her dark intentions, before anyone else. It was a disturbing thought, yet it also gave her a newfound appreciation for the keen instincts of her feline companion. Amelia remembered Detective Davy's words. "Cats are incredibly perceptive, Miss Amelia. They see things we don't." His words had resonated with her, and now she truly understood what he meant. Whisk had seen the darkness lurking in Mrs. Hawthorne's heart, even when she was hiding it from everyone else. He had witnessed the malice in her eyes, the animosity in her actions, and he had reacted, warning Amelia in his own subtle way. As Amelia spent more time with Whisk, she started noticing things she had never noticed before. His gaze, usually gentle and playful, sometimes held a fierce, almost predatory intensity. His ears, always twitching with alertness, would sometimes flatten against his head, his body tense, as if sensing danger. It was a glimpse into his world, a world of keen perception and intuitive understanding, a world beyond the reach of human comprehension. Amelia's life had been turned upside down, her world forever changed. She had lost her mother in a senseless act of violence, a loss that left a gaping hole in her life. But in the midst of her grief, she found solace in the unwavering love and loyalty of her cat. Whisk, the creature she had initially suspected, the creature who had been unjustly blamed, had become a beacon of comfort and companionship. He had shown her the hidden depths of his nature, his sensitivity and perception, his unwavering loyalty, and in doing so, he had taught her to see the world differently, to trust her intuition, to look beyond the surface and see the truth, even when it was hidden behind layers of deception. Amelia had learned a profound lesson about the world, about human nature, and about the creatures that shared it with her. She had learned that sometimes the most dangerous creatures are not the ones we think they are, and sometimes the creatures we love the most are capable of things beyond our wildest imagination. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Amelia looked at Whisk, who was curled up beside her on the porch swing. She reached down and stroked his soft fur, a deep sense of gratitude welling up within her. She had lost her mother, but in her grief, she had found a new understanding. The scent of lilies still lingered in the air, a ghost of the floral arrangement that had graced her mother's funeral. Amelia, sitting on the porch swing, watched Whisk, her sleek black cat, stalk a butterfly flitting among the lavender bushes. He was a creature of shadows and silence, but now his movements were deliberate, almost comical in their exaggerated grace. He'd never shown interest in birds before, but since that night, he seemed fixated on them, his gaze following their erratic flight with a strange intensity. She had a newfound understanding of Whisk. His world, she now realized, wasn't limited to the confines of their house, his plush bed, and the endless supply of tuna. He saw things, sensed things, that were beyond her human comprehension. His silent observations, the way he'd sat by her mother's side, his purr, a low rumble in the stillness of the garden, all pointed to an awareness that was both unnerving and comforting. She picked up a book, a worn copy of The Cat Who Could, that her mother had given her as a child. The stories in this book, while fanciful, seemed to resonate with a truth she had only just begun to grasp. Cats, she thought, were more than just pets. They were ancient beings, carrying within them a wisdom that was both timeless and inexplicable. They saw the world through a different lens, their senses attuned to frequencies beyond human comprehension. Whisk leaped onto the swing, his sleek body curling into her lap. He rubbed against her leg, a purr rumbling deep in his chest, a comforting presence in the silence of the afternoon. He was her anchor, her silent companion in the wake of loss, his presence a balm to her grief. Detective Davies had visited her a few days after Mrs. Hawthorne's confession, a flicker of something in his eyes that hinted at a shared understanding. He had brought her a small, intricately carved wooden cat, a gift from a colleague who had been a fellow cat lover. He had also confirmed what she had suspected, that the evidence against Mrs. Hawthorne had been overwhelmingly strong. The white feather found near her mother's body, he said, had been identified as belonging to a specific species of dove, a dove that Mrs. Hawthorne had openly expressed a hatred for. The evidence, he explained, had been meticulous and compelling, leaving no room for doubt. As Amelia held the wooden cat, its smooth surface warm in her hand, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The justice served, the truth revealed, had brought a sense of closure, but the pain of her loss lingered, a constant ache in her heart. Whisk, sensing her shift in mood, nudged her hand with his head, his soft fur a gentle reminder of his unwavering presence. The days that followed were a blur of sorting through her mother's belongings, the scent of her perfume clinging to her clothes, the echo of her voice in the quiet corners of the house. She found a journal tucked away in her mother's desk, its pages filled with her mother's thoughts, her dreams, and her fears. In a heartfelt entry, she spoke of Whisk, of his unconditional love, his silent companionship, and his unwavering loyalty. Amelia realized that her mother had understood Whisk in a way that she had not. She had seen the depths of his being, the unspoken language of his purrs, the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the way he'd seemed to sense her own emotions. "I think he knows more than we do," her mother had written, her words echoing in Amelia's mind. "Perhaps he's not just a cat. Perhaps he's something more." As she read the final entry, a single tear rolled down her cheek, a tear that wasn't just for her mother, but for the realization that she had underestimated Whisk. She had judged him, dismissed him as just a creature of instinct, unaware of the depth of his being, the wisdom he carried within his enigmatic eyes. Whisk nudged her hand again, his purr a reassuring rumble. He was there, always there, a silent sentinel in a world of noise and chaos, his presence a beacon of comfort, his gaze filled with an ancient wisdom that whispered secrets to her heart. Amelia looked at him, her cat, her companion, her confidante, her silent guardian. She had always known that he was a special cat, but now she saw him in a new light. She had finally learned to listen to the quiet whispers of his soul, to trust the instincts that had always guided him. Whisk, she realized, wasn't just her cat. Amelia sat on the porch swing, cradling Whisk in her arms. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was cool, carrying the scent of lilies, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. As she stroked Whisk's soft fur, she felt a surge of affection mixed with a strange unease. Whisk had always been more than just a pet. He seemed to understand her, her emotions, her fears, in a way that no other creature ever had. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Whisk is a guardian, Amelia. He's been with our family for generations, watching over us." Now, as she held him close, Amelia realized the depth of her mother's words. Whisk wasn't just a cat. He was a silent, watchful companion, a protector of sorts. But what had he seen? What did he know that she didn't? The mystery of her mother's death had been solved, but a new question had taken root in her heart. What had Whisk witnessed in that garden that night? And what secrets did he hold within his knowing gaze? Amelia looked at him, her heart filled with a mixture of love, grief, and an unsettling sense of anticipation. The night was young, and the shadows held mysteries yet to be revealed. Amelia stared at Whisk, his emerald eyes gleaming in the afternoon sun that streamed through the living room window. He sat perched on the arm of the armchair, a regal figure of black fur and sleek muscle, his tail twitching rhythmically. He was more than just a pet, more than just a furry companion. He was a witness, an observer, a silent guardian. The revelation of Mrs. Hawthorne's guilt had shaken Amelia to her core. It wasn't just the shock of discovering her neighbor's true nature. It was the realization that Whisk had known all along. He had seen the truth, the hidden malice behind the saccharine smile, and he had kept his silence. "You knew, didn't you?" Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Whisk blinked, his gaze unwavering. He was a master of subtle communication, his body language speaking volumes. A twitch of his ear, a flick of his tail, a subtle shift in his posture all conveyed a depth of understanding that surpassed anything Amelia had ever encountered. "You saw everything, didn't you?" she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "You saw Mrs. Hawthorne. You saw her do it." The cat's gaze remained fixed on her, his emerald eyes seeming to bore into her soul. Amelia felt a prickle of unease. Was he judging her? Was he disappointed in her for not trusting him? She reached out a hand, tentatively stroking his head. Whisk leaned into her touch, a soft purr rumbling in his chest. It was a gesture of comfort, a reassurance, and Amelia felt a wave of relief wash over her. "I'm sorry, Whisk," she murmured. "I was so angry, so lost. I blamed you. But you're not like that." She paused, her mind racing. If Whisk had been able to discern Mrs. Hawthorne's true nature, what else had he witnessed? What other secrets did his feline eyes hold? As the weeks passed, Amelia found herself paying closer attention to her cat. She studied his movements, his reactions, the slightest twitch of his whiskers, trying to decipher the unspoken language of his feline world. Whisk, in turn, seemed to sense her change in attitude. He became more attentive, more communicative, his emerald eyes sparkling with a newfound intelligence. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Amelia reading a book, Whisk settled onto her lap, his purr a comforting rumble against her chest. Suddenly, he rose, his ears pricked, his gaze fixed on the window. Amelia followed his line of sight. A thin plume of smoke drifted lazily from the chimney of the house across the street. It wasn't unusual for Mrs. Hawthorne to burn incense in the evening, a ritual she performed every night. Yet, this time, something felt different. There was a strange stillness in the air, a tension that made her skin crawl. Whisk's tail began to twitch, a rapid, nervous movement. He padded to the window, his eyes glued to the house across the street. Amelia watched him, her heart pounding. A primal fear, instinctive and raw, took hold of her. Suddenly, Whisk let out a sharp hiss, his fur bristling. He leaped onto the windowsill, his claws extended, his body tense with a ferocity she had never seen before. He looked back at her, his eyes wide with alarm. Amelia's gut twisted. Something was wrong. She had to get to Mrs. Hawthorne. She hurried across the street, her mind racing. As she reached the front door, she noticed the door was ajar, the hinges groaning slightly. She pushed the door open, her heart pounding in her chest. The air inside was thick with smoke, the scent of burning wood and something else, something acrid and chemical. A thick haze hung low in the air, obscuring the room. Amelia's eyes, adjusting to the dimness, saw a flickering light emanating from the back room. She cautiously made her way through the house, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. As she reached the doorway, she gasped. Mrs. Hawthorne lay sprawled on the floor, her face contorted in agony. Her body was partially obscured by a small, overturned table, a spilled bottle of liquid beside it. The air around her was thick with the scent of smoke and something else, a chemical odor that stung her nostrils. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Hawthorne was unconscious, her breathing shallow and strained. She needed help. But even as she reached for her phone, her eyes fell on a small, crumpled piece of paper on the... Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the rising panic within her. She knelt beside Mrs. Hawthorne, the old woman's pallid face bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Her breathing was shallow, almost non-existent. Amelia's fingers brushed against Mrs. Hawthorne's wrist, seeking a pulse, a sign of life. The skin felt clammy and cold, sending a shiver down Amelia's spine. A strangled cry escaped Amelia's lips. Her mind, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, struggled to process the situation. Why was Mrs. Hawthorne unconscious? Had she been attacked? Was this another sinister act, another facet of the hidden darkness that had infected their seemingly peaceful community? As she scanned the room, her eyes fell on a small, overturned table, its contents scattered across the floor. A half-empty bottle of pills lay next to a crumpled tissue, and a faint, sweet, sickly smell hung in the air, a potent cocktail of medicine and decay. Amelia's stomach lurched. Could Mrs. Hawthorne have overdosed? The thought was almost unbearable. The woman, whom Amelia had once considered a harmless, if slightly nosy, neighbor, had become a complex figure, shrouded in secrecy and potential danger. Her initial anger had morphed into a chilling realization. Mrs. Hawthorne wasn't just a perpetrator of a crime, she was a victim of something far more insidious. Her gaze fell upon Whisk, who sat perched atop a mahogany bookshelf, his emerald eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He had led her here, guided her to this scene, but why? What did he know? And what was he waiting for? Amelia, a knot of tension tightening in her chest, rose to her feet, her mind racing. The first responders would be at least 10 minutes away, and Mrs. Hawthorne's condition seemed precarious. She needed to do something, anything, but what? Whisk, sensing her turmoil, descended from the bookshelf, gracefully landing on the floor with a soft thud. He sauntered towards her, his tail twitching nervously. His eyes, reflecting the pale moonlight, seemed to burn with a knowledge beyond his feline comprehension. He nudged Amelia's leg with his head, urging her to follow. The tension in Amelia's shoulders eased slightly. Her initial mistrust, fueled by her grief and the unsettling events of the past few weeks, had transformed into a hesitant acceptance of Whisk's guidance. She realized that he wasn't just her pet. He was an extraordinary being, a silent guardian with an uncanny understanding of the world around him. She followed Whisk's lead as he weaved through the cluttered rooms of Mrs. Hawthorne's house, his sleek form navigating the shadows with ease. He paused at a closed door at the end of a narrow hallway, his head tilting as if listening to something beyond Amelia's perception. Amelia, her heart pounding in her chest, reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling slightly. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room, a cluttered workroom smelling of must and forgotten herbs. Whisk, with an almost imperceptible nod of his head, urged Amelia forward. She stepped into the room, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The room was filled with boxes, books, and vials, all seemingly haphazardly arranged. A faint glow emanated from a corner, revealing a small desk covered in handwritten notes and scattered herbs. Amelia's eyes widened as she saw a small, worn leather-bound book lying open on the desk, its pages filled with intricate drawings and scrawled notes in a language she didn't recognize. The book was accompanied by a vial filled with a viscous, dark liquid, its label barely legible under a layer of dust. Whisk, his tail swishing gently, nudged the book with his nose. He nudged it again, as if urging her to look closer. Hesitantly, Amelia picked up the book, its pages cool and dry beneath her fingertips. The drawings depicted strange, swirling symbols and intricate diagrams, each accompanied by a series of cryptic symbols and numbers. The language was unfamiliar, yet somehow familiar, as if it resonated with a forgotten part of her memory. Amelia's mind, still reeling from the events of the evening, struggled to make sense of the scene before her. What was this book? What was the significance of the mysterious liquid in the vial? And why had Whisk led her here? As she continued to examine the book, a faint scent drifted towards her, a potent, musky aroma that reminded her of something familiar, something she couldn't quite place. It was a scent. The air in the room was thick with a scent of dust and forgotten things. Amelia, her heart pounding against her ribs, reached out to touch the book. Its leather cover was cracked and worn, and the pages felt brittle under her fingertips. A series of strange symbols and intricate patterns were etched onto the cover, their meaning utterly unknown to her. She lifted the book, its weight surprisingly heavy for its size, and flipped it open, its pages filled with handwritten script in a language she couldn't decipher. Suddenly, Whisk, who had been circling her legs, let out a low, guttural growl, his fur bristling. He pressed his head against the book, as if trying to warn her against its contents. Amelia hesitated, a chill snaking down her spine. The book felt wrong, not just because of its contents, but because of the way it seemed to whisper secrets in the silence of the room. She closed the book, her fingers lingering on the smooth leather. It was as if she could feel the power within it, radiating out in waves, a power that sent shivers down her arms. She knew, with an unsettling certainty, that this book was the key to understanding the events unfolding around them, the events that had led to Mrs. Hawthorne's collapse. Turning her attention to the vial, she saw a clear liquid shimmering within it. It was a pale, almost ethereal blue, and a strange energy seemed to pulse within its depths. Amelia felt a sense of dread as she reached for it. She knew, instinctively, that this liquid was no ordinary potion. As she held the vial in her hand, the room seemed to shift and warp around her. The air grew thick and heavy, and the whispers of the book became louder, more insistent. Amelia felt a surge of primal fear, a raw, instinctive terror that sent her heart racing. She wanted to flee, to escape this room, this house, this whole unsettling situation. But Whisk, his emerald eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity, nudged her hand, urging her to open the vial. His gaze seemed to burn into her, filled with a deep, primal knowledge that both terrified and enthralled her. He seemed to be imploring her to trust him, to trust the strange path he was leading her down. And in that moment, Amelia, weary from the weight of grief and fear, felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She looked at Whisk, his unwavering green eyes seeming to hold the key to a world she never knew existed. She knew, in her heart, that she had to trust him, that her survival depended on it. She carefully unscrewed the vial and sniffed the contents. The scent was sharp and metallic, with an underlying sweetness that reminded her of something familiar, yet strangely out of place. She realized that the odor was reminiscent of the strange flowers that Mrs. Hawthorne had been cultivating in her garden. Flowers that, she now knew, were not meant for decoration, but for a far more sinister purpose. As Amelia stared into the swirling blue liquid, she felt a sudden jolt of energy course through her body. It was as if the vial was attempting to communicate with her, to share its knowledge, its secrets. She felt a surge of power, a sense of clarity that seemed to unlock hidden doors within her mind. She glanced at the book, its symbols now seeming less alien and more like a map to a world she was only beginning to understand. She realized that she was not just a grieving daughter, but a conduit for a power far greater than she could have ever imagined. Whisk, sensing her growing understanding, let out a soft purr, his emerald eyes filled with a gentle reassurance. He knew, as she did now, that their lives would never be the same. This was not just about saving Mrs. Hawthorne. It was about facing the darkness that was slowly consuming their community, the darkness that had claimed her mother's life. And they would face it together. Amelia, the grieving daughter, and Whisk, the mysterious feline, would stand against the unseen forces at play, guided by the ancient knowledge held within the book and the vial. They had a long and perilous journey ahead of them, but Amelia knew that she was not alone. Whisk was with her, his loyal eyes a beacon in the gathering darkness. He was more than just a cat. He was her guardian, her guide, her protector. He was the key to understanding the truth, and to unraveling the secrets that had been buried for too long. As Amelia stared at the book and the vial, her mind racing with possibilities, a new resolve filled her. The blue liquid in the vial shimmered, its surface rippling like a miniature ocean. It pulsated with a gentle energy that seemed to radiate warmth, a stark contrast to the icy chill that had settled in the study. Amelia held the vial gingerly, her fingertips tracing the delicate carvings on its glass surface. She couldn't shake the feeling that this object was more than just a vessel. It held something ancient, something powerful, something that felt connected to her in a way she couldn't explain. Whisk, ever the watchful companion, sat perched on a nearby bookshelf, his golden eyes fixed on the vial with an intensity that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. He seemed to understand the significance of the object, his gaze unwavering, as if he were absorbing its secrets. Amelia couldn't ignore the feeling of urgency gnawing at her. The vial, the book, the unconscious Mrs. Hawthorne, everything felt connected, the threads of a larger narrative weaving their way through her life. It was as if the world had become a puzzle, and she was the only one with the key. "Whisk," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "What do we do?" The cat didn't respond with a meow or a purr. Instead, he simply blinked slowly, his golden eyes reflecting a knowing light. It was a silent affirmation, a message that communicated more than words ever could. He was guiding her. He was leading her down a path she hadn't expected, a path paved with shadows and secrets, but also with a strange sense of purpose. Amelia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The vial felt cool against her palm, its energy pulsating in sync with her own heartbeat. It was a strange, almost symbiotic connection, like two puzzle pieces finally finding their place. "I trust you," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. The book lay open on the desk, its pages filled with strange symbols and words in an unknown language. It was as if a portal had opened, a gateway to a world she never knew existed. The words danced before her eyes, a mesmerizing spectacle that both fascinated and frightened her. It was a language of whispers and shadows, of ancient secrets and forgotten lore. The scent of the blue liquid was intoxicating, a blend of citrus and wildflowers with a hint of something primal, something untamed. Amelia took a tentative sniff, the scent filling her senses with a strange, almost exhilarating energy. It was a scent that felt familiar, yet utterly foreign, a reminder of a past she couldn't recall. The book beckoned her closer, its pages a siren call to a hidden world. She gently turned the page, the symbols swirling before her eyes. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, whispering secrets that she could almost understand. A sudden warmth spread through her body, a tingling sensation that started in her fingertips and flowed outward. It was an unfamiliar feeling, a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. The vial in her hand pulsed with a stronger light, the blue liquid within shimmering with a newfound intensity. Whisk nudged her hand with his head, his fur soft against her palm. His eyes held a reassuring light, a silent promise that she was not alone in this journey. He was her guide, her protector, her confidante. Amelia felt a surge of confidence. She was no longer the grieving daughter lost in a world of sorrow. She was something more. She was a conduit, a vessel for something powerful, something ancient, and she was ready to embrace it. The book revealed more secrets, unveiling a world she had never imagined existed. It spoke of a hidden society, a lineage of women who possessed an innate power, a connection to the world beyond the veil of the ordinary. They were guardians, protectors of a power that could heal and destroy. Amelia's blood ran cold. She was not just a grieving daughter, she was a descendant of these women, a guardian of a power that had been passed down for generations. Her mother, her grandmother, her ancestors, they had all held this power, this knowledge, and now it was hers. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, washing away her grief and fear, replacing them with a newfound purpose. She was not alone in her grief, not alone in her fight against the darkness that had consumed her mother. Her ancestors were with her, guiding her, protecting her. But there was more to it than just a lineage. The book spoke of a darkness, a force that threatened to engulf the world, a darkness that her family had fought for centuries. This darkness, this evil, was what had taken her mother, and it was what? Amelia held the vial, its cool glass against her palm. The liquid within shimmered, a deep cerulean blue that seemed to pulse with an inner light. It was mesmerizing, like a captured fragment of the sky, but with a depth that suggested more than mere color. She caught a whiff of the liquid, a scent at once earthy and floral, strangely familiar yet entirely foreign. This was no ordinary potion, but something imbued with a potent, ancient energy. She looked to Whisk, perched on the desk beside her, his green eyes fixed on her, unblinking. She saw a flicker of curiosity in them, a spark of recognition that only deepened the mystery surrounding the vial. It seemed Whisk knew something she didn't, a knowledge that resided in his feline intuition. The book, nestled beside the vial, remained closed. Its cover was leather, worn smooth with age, its edges delicately embossed with symbols she couldn't decipher. The book, she sensed, was a key to unlocking the secrets of the blue liquid, the secrets of her lineage, and the secrets of the dark force that had claimed her mother. She reached out, her fingers tracing the symbols etched on the cover, feeling a subtle current of energy flow through her. As she turned the pages, the symbols danced before her, a language that whispered in the back of her mind, a language she was slowly beginning to understand. It was a language of power, of ancient magic, of a lineage that stretched back to a time before recorded history. The book spoke of the guardians, women like her, who possessed the ability to wield this magic, to protect the world from a darkness that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its moment to consume all light. With each page she turned, the book unveiled a story of her family's legacy, a lineage of women who had sacrificed everything to protect this power, to keep the darkness at bay. Amelia, she realized, was part of this lineage, destined to inherit the mantle of her ancestors, to become the next guardian. A wave of responsibility washed over her, a sense of destiny that both frightened and exhilarated her. Suddenly, a chill ran through her, an unsettling sense of foreboding. Her cat, Whisk, seemed to sense it too, his fur bristling as he arched his back, eyes narrowed in warning. The air crackled with a strange energy, the house seeming to hold its breath. She felt it, an unseen presence, a shadow growing in the corner of her perception. Amelia gasped, the book falling from her grasp. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at Whisk, searching for reassurance, but even he seemed to tremble, his amber eyes wide with fear. It was no mere shadow, but a true entity, something dark and ancient, something that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike. The entity stepped out of the shadows, a towering figure shrouded in a cloak that seemed to absorb the light. Its face was hidden by the hood, but its presence radiated with an oppressive power that chilled her to the bone. The scent of decay filled the air, the odor of ancient evil that resonated within her very soul. The power, it hissed, its voice a low, guttural growl. The power you possess, it is mine. You are but a vessel for its true owner. Amelia felt a surge of defiance rise within her, a fierce will to resist the darkness that threatened to engulf her. She clutched the vial of blue liquid, its energy surging within her, a counterpoint to the insidious evil that filled the room. "I will not let you take it," she declared, her voice trembling but strong. "This power is not yours to claim." The entity laughed, a sound like grating rocks, echoing through the house. "Foolish girl," it sneered, "you are no match for me. You are a mere mortal, a powerless child playing at wielding power you do not understand." But Amelia was not just a child. She was a guardian, a descendant of a powerful lineage, and she was not afraid. She lifted the vial, its blue light illuminating her face, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. "I am not just a child," she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I am a guardian, and I will protect what is mine. I will protect this power, and I will protect my family." As she spoke, a surge of energy coursed through her veins, a wave of power that emanated from the blue liquid in her hand. It filled her with courage and determination, and she felt a connection to something ancient and powerful, something that had been. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she felt the icy grip of the entity's presence. It pulsed with a raw, untamed power, hungry for the magic that coursed through her veins. The book, its pages illuminated by a strange, ethereal glow, offered a glimpse into her lineage, a history of women who fought against this very darkness, wielding the blue liquid as their weapon. The air crackled with anticipation. The room filled with an unnerving silence, broken only by the rhythmic beating of Amelia's heart. A cold sweat slicked her skin, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. She wasn't just a young woman grieving for her mother, she was the key to a battle far older and more significant than she could ever have imagined. As the entity's hold tightened, Amelia knew she had to choose: succumb to its overwhelming power or fight for her legacy, for her family, and for the world itself. The air crackled with a palpable tension, the blue liquid pulsing with a faint, eerie glow. It felt alive, sentient, radiating a power that both frightened and fascinated Amelia. The book, its leather cover embossed with cryptic symbols, lay open before her, its pages whispering secrets of a world she never knew existed. It spoke of a lineage, of guardians, and of a formidable enemy, a darkness that sought to consume the power she now held. Whisk, perched on the windowsill, watched her with keen eyes, his golden gaze unwavering. He knew, Amelia realized, he knew everything. He had led her to this truth, guided her through the labyrinth of deceit, and now he seemed to anticipate the unfolding chaos. He was more than just a cat, Amelia thought. He was her protector, her guide, her silent confidante. The air grew colder, the shadows in the room deepening, morphing into a grotesque parody of the familiar. The blue liquid pulsed faster, its glow intensifying, casting an unsettling light on the room. A voice, raspy and filled with malice, echoed through the silence. "Welcome, Amelia, to your destiny." The voice resonated from the shadows, its presence palpable yet unseen. Amelia felt a tremor run through her, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am the one who seeks what you possess," the voice hissed, its tone laced with cruel amusement. "The power that flows within your blood, the power that has been passed down through generations, it is mine to claim." Amelia gripped the book tighter, her heart pounding against her ribs. The blue liquid vibrated, responding to the voice, its glow intensifying. It was a power she hadn't known she possessed, a power that resonated with a primal force, a power that resonated with her cat, with Whisk. "You will not take it," Amelia declared, her voice finding unexpected strength. "I am a guardian, and I will protect it." The shadows in the room danced, becoming more defined, more menacing. A pair of glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness, sending shivers down Amelia's spine. "Foolish girl," the voice sneered. "You are but a pawn in a game you do not understand. You cannot fight what you cannot comprehend. You cannot defeat what is inevitable." Whisk rose from the windowsill, his fur bristling, his golden eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent a jolt of courage through Amelia. He was her shield, her protector, and he wouldn't let her be defeated. "I will fight," Amelia declared, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. "For my mother, for myself, and for the power that is mine to protect." The entity in the shadows chuckled, its laughter echoing through the room, sending chills down her spine. "You are nothing but a child," the voice mocked. "You have no power against me. I am the darkness, I am the night, I am the one who devours the light." Amelia tightened her grip on the book, her gaze unwavering. The blue liquid pulsed faster, its glow growing more intense, feeding off her defiance. The power coursed through her, filling her with a strength she never knew she possessed. She would not yield. She would not be defeated. She was Amelia, the guardian, and she would protect the power entrusted to her. The shadows coalesced, solidifying into a monstrous form. Its eyes glowed an infernal red, its mouth a gaping maw, filled with sharp, jagged teeth. It was a creature of nightmares, a manifestation of pure evil, a force that threatened to consume everything in its path. Amelia stood her ground, the blue liquid pulsating in her hand, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. She would fight, she would defend, she would stand against the darkness, and she would not give up, not as long as Whisk stood beside her, not as long as the blue liquid pulsed with power, not as long as the ancient lineage coursed through her veins. The monstrous form advanced, its growl echoing through the room. Amelia took a deep breath, the blue liquid shimmering in her hand. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she had been waiting for. She was Amelia, and she was ready. She would fight the darkness, she would protect her power, and she would honor the legacy entrusted to her. The battle had begun. The monstrous form that the entity had taken filled the room. Its shadow stretched like a hungry maw across the walls, its form shifting, warping, solidifying into a grotesque amalgamation of darkness. Amelia felt a tremor of fear run through her, a cold dread that threatened to overwhelm her. But alongside the fear, a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. The blue liquid pulsed in her hand, an anchor against the encroaching darkness. This was her moment, the moment she had been preparing for, even if she hadn't realized it. She held the vial tightly, the cool glass against her skin, a grounding force in the face of the monstrous entity. It seemed to mock her, its grotesque features contorting into a semblance of a smile. "You will not win," it rasped, its voice a guttural whisper that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the room. "You are but a child, a mere mortal against a force beyond your comprehension." Amelia straightened her shoulders, her gaze meeting the entity's. The fear still lingered, but a fierce determination had taken root within her. "I may be a child," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "but I am not helpless. I am a guardian, and I will protect this power." The entity laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. "You think you can stand against me? This power is not yours to control. It belongs to me, to the darkness." "No," Amelia countered, her voice gaining strength. "This power is a legacy, a responsibility. My family has protected it for generations, and I will not let you take it." With a surge of defiance, Amelia stepped forward, her hand outstretched towards the entity. The blue liquid pulsed in her hand, its glow growing brighter, a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. The entity snarled, its form shifting, contorting in frustration. It recoiled, as if the light of the liquid was a painful thing, a reminder of a power it craved. "You cannot win," the entity roared, its voice shaking with rage. "The darkness will consume you, like it consumed all those before you." Amelia gritted her teeth, focusing her will on the blue liquid. It pulsed faster, its glow intensifying, bathing the room in an ethereal blue light. As the entity recoiled, Amelia felt a surge of power flow through her, a sensation of raw energy that filled her with a newfound strength. It was a connection to the lineage, to the power that she now possessed. The entity, weakened by the light, began to shift again. Amelia felt a sudden pang of empathy, a fleeting sense of understanding for the creature trapped within the darkness. It was a monster, yes, but it was also a creature of power, seeking something it craved. Suddenly, the entity's form began to change. Its grotesque features morphed into a shape more familiar, more human. A face, pale and gaunt, with dark, hollow eyes, emerged from the shadows. Amelia could see the pain and desperation behind those eyes, a flicker of humanity trapped within the monster. "Please," the entity's voice, now a strained whisper, begged. "Do not destroy me. I am not evil. I am simply lost, desperate. I need this power to survive." Amelia felt a conflict within her, a tug between her own determination and the entity's plea. She saw the desperation in its eyes, the pain of its existence, and she realized that the darkness had not consumed this entity, but it had been consumed by it. "What do you need it for?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "To escape," the entity rasped. "To find a place where I can be free from this darkness, where I can be whole again." Amelia looked at the entity, its face a mask of pain and longing. She understood. She knew the feeling of being lost, of searching for something that was beyond her grasp. Suddenly, she felt a nudge against her leg. Whisk, her cat, had emerged from the shadows, his eyes glowing with an ethereal light. He purred softly, his presence a calming force in a tense atmosphere. The entity, sensing Whisk's presence, flinched. "He knows," the entity whispered, its voice tinged with fear. "He sees the truth." Whisk, his eyes fixed on the entity, nudged Amelia's hand, urging her to hold the vial closer to the entity. The blue liquid, under Amelia's control, pulsed with a soft, gentle light. Amelia looked at the entity, at the pain in its eyes, and she felt a strange compassion grow within her. She remembered the entity's words. Whisk, sensing Amelia's internal turmoil, nuzzled against her leg. His green eyes, usually bright and playful, were now filled with a quiet understanding. He let out a soft purr, a vibration that seemed to resonate within Amelia, calming her racing thoughts. The entity, its monstrous form receding, looked at Amelia with an expression that was both pleading and filled with a deep, abiding sadness. It spoke, its voice now raspy and hollow, like wind whistling through a cracked window. "Please," it whispered, "I beg of you, understand." Amelia, still reeling from the shock of seeing the entity's human face, found herself unable to speak. The entity, sensing her hesitation, continued, "I am not what you see. I am a prisoner, trapped by this darkness, forced to feed on its power to survive. I crave freedom, to break free from this torment, to be whole again. But I cannot do it alone." It raised its hand, its monstrous claw transforming into a human hand, revealing a single, delicate silver ring on its finger. "This," it said, "is the only thing left of me, a fragment of my true self, a reminder of who I once was. It is all that stands between me and oblivion." Amelia stared at the silver ring, its intricate design a stark contrast to the grotesque entity before her. The entity continued, its voice a low, mournful plea. "I sense the power within you, the same power that flows through my own broken heart. Help me, I beg of you. Release me from this prison of darkness, and together, we can reclaim what has been lost." The entity's words echoed in Amelia's mind, a cacophony of fear and confusion. She had been taught to fear this darkness, to see it as a relentless predator, an embodiment of all that was evil. Yet, here it was, pleading, revealing a desperate need for release, for redemption. A wave of empathy washed over Amelia. She knew the pain of being trapped, of feeling like a prisoner within her own life. The entity, despite its terrifying appearance, seemed to share that same burden. For the first time, Amelia saw beyond the monster, glimpsed the humanity hidden beneath the darkness. Whisk, ever perceptive, nuzzled against Amelia's leg again, his green eyes gleaming with a quiet wisdom. He nudged her hand with his head, urging her forward. The entity, sensing her shift, lowered its head, its eyes pleading. Amelia, with a deep breath, made a decision. "I can't just stand here," she whispered, more to herself than to the entity. "I need to know more." The entity, sensing a change in Amelia's stance, lowered its head further, its voice a raspy whisper. "Tell me," it implored. "Tell me who you are." Amelia, taking another deep breath, raised her chin, her eyes meeting the entity's. "My name is Amelia," she said, "and I am a guardian. It's my destiny to protect this power, to ensure it's not consumed by darkness." The entity's eyes widened slightly, its expression shifting from pleading to a hesitant hope. "A guardian," it repeated. "Then perhaps you understand." Amelia, still wary, but with a flicker of understanding in her own eyes, asked, "Understand what?" The entity, its voice softer than before, spoke of a long-forgotten war, a struggle between light and darkness that had raged for millennia. It spoke of a powerful blue liquid, a source of immense energy that had been used to protect the world from the encroaching shadows. It spoke of a chosen lineage, guardians who had sworn to safeguard this power, to keep it safe from those who sought to corrupt it. Amelia listened intently, her mind reeling from the revelations. This was not the simple story she had been told, the tale of good versus evil, light versus darkness. This was a complex tapestry of history, woven with threads of power, sacrifice, and the struggle for freedom. The entity, revealing more of its history, spoke of a betrayal, of a powerful guardian who had turned against his brethren, succumbing to the allure of the darkness. It spoke of a fractured world, where the balance of power had been shattered, leaving the guardians scattered and vulnerable. And then it spoke of itself, a guardian who had been consumed by the darkness, forced to feed on its power to survive. It had been searching, hoping to find another guardian, someone who might understand, someone who might offer a way out of its prison of darkness. Amelia, her mind now filled with this new understanding, looked at the entity with a mix of pity and fear. She saw not a Whisk's eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, held a gravity that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. He nudged her hand, his purr a soft rumble against her skin, and she knew that this was not the time for fear. This was the time to trust. Taking a shaky breath, she held out her hand, the vial of blue liquid pulsing in her palm. The entity, its form shifting from monstrous to vaguely human, stared at her with eyes that seemed to hold a universe of sorrow. "Please," it rasped, its voice a hollow echo. "I am trapped. This darkness, it consumes me. Help me." Amelia stared back, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature before her, its skin a tapestry of shadows and writhing tendrils, was terrifying. Yet there was a vulnerability in its voice, a desperation that chipped away at the wall of fear she had built. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The entity's form flickered, the shadows retreating slightly, revealing a face. It was a face she knew, a face that had haunted her dreams, her grandmother, her mother's mother, her first link to this lineage of guardians. But the face was twisted, contorted by the darkness that clung to it. "I was a guardian, like you," the entity whispered, its voice hoarse. "But I was betrayed, and the darkness took hold." A wave of confusion washed over Amelia. Her grandmother? Betrayed? But how? And how was she, a seemingly ordinary girl, a guardian? The entity seemed to sense her confusion. "The world was different then," it rasped, its voice laced with pain. "There was a war for the power that flows through you, the power that binds this world together. The light, the guardians, we fought the darkness. But some of us, we were lost." The entity paused, its eyes filled with a longing that tore at Amelia's heart. "I was one of them. I was consumed by the darkness, unable to break free. I am trapped within this shell, a prisoner of my own despair." Amelia felt a pang of sympathy. The entity, despite its monstrous form, was not a villain. It was a lost soul, a guardian trapped in a cycle of despair. The entity, sensing her shift in perspective, continued. "The darkness is powerful, Amelia. It feeds on despair, on fear. It seeks to control this world, to break the balance. And you are the key. The power flows through you, and only you can stop it." The entity stretched out a hand towards her, its form flickering once more. "Help me, Amelia. Release me from this prison. We must work together to stop the darkness. We must protect the world." Amelia stared at the entity's outstretched hand, her heart pounding with fear and uncertainty. Trusting this entity, this being who was both familiar and terrifying, was a terrifying thought. But she knew, deep down, that she had to try. The entity's pleas, the desperate yearning for freedom in its eyes, awakened something within her. The blue liquid pulsed in her hand, its glow reflecting in her own eyes. This was a choice, not just for herself, but for the world. "I will help you," she said, her voice resolute, a tremor still shaking it. "But you need to trust me, too. Tell me what happened. Tell me about the war, about the betrayal, about the darkness. Tell me about this power that flows through me and how I can use it to fight." The entity's form flickered, the shadows retreating, revealing the face of her grandmother more clearly. A soft smile, laced with both gratitude and sorrow, crossed her lips. "You are stronger than you know, Amelia," she whispered. "The power is yours. It is time for you to embrace your destiny." As the entity spoke, the blue liquid in Amelia's hand pulsed, a warm current flowing into her veins. She felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that spread through her body. She was not just Amelia, the ordinary girl who had lost her mother. She was something more, something powerful. She was a guardian. With a newfound determination, Amelia prepared to learn the truth, a truth that would change her life forever. The entity, her grandmother, would guide her, teach her how to wield the power that coursed through her veins, and how to face the darkness that threatened to consume the world. The battle was just beginning, but Amelia was ready to fight. She had a purpose, a destiny, and she would not fail. Whisk nudged Amelia's hand, his emerald eyes shining with an almost human understanding. "We need to help her," he meowed, his voice a soft rumble in the air. Amelia stared at her grandmother, at the monstrous figure that had revealed itself to be the woman she loved, a victim of a darkness she barely understood. Fear still tugged at her, but a new emotion, a burning hope, bloomed within her. "We have to," she whispered, her voice thick with determination. Her grandmother, or at least the remnants of her, strained against the darkness that bound her, her voice a hollow echo. "The power, you must understand. It is the key to restoring balance, the key to ending this war." A wave of nausea washed over Amelia, the weight of the world suddenly pressing down on her slender shoulders. "War?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Her grandmother's face contorted, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "A war waged since the dawn of time, light against darkness, guardians against her voice trailed off, a guttural, rasping sound filling the air. Amelia, guided by a growing sense of purpose, took a step forward, her hand outstretched. "Who are they? Who are the ones who threaten this balance?" A flicker of recognition crossed her grandmother's face, her eyes, now pools of swirling darkness, momentarily clearing. "They call themselves the Shadow Brood. They seek to consume the light, to plunge the world into eternal night. They are, her voice cracked, her words dissolving into unintelligible rasps. A wave of empathy surged through Amelia. Her grandmother, her own flesh and blood, was a prisoner, a victim of this ancient war. The fight was not just about her destiny as a guardian, but about saving a loved one, about restoring balance to a world she'd never known was so deeply fractured. "Whisk," she said, her voice resolute, "we need to find a way to break free of this darkness. We need to find a way to help her." Her cat, Whisk, rubbed against her leg, his purr a reassuring vibration against her skin. He understood. He had always understood. He was a guide, a protector, a source of unwavering support in the face of the unknown. Amelia, with newfound purpose, turned her attention to the book, the ancient tome that had unveiled this world of darkness and light. "We need to learn about this war," she declared, her voice echoing in the silence of the room. The book, bound in worn leather, felt strangely warm in her hands. It held within its pages the secrets of her lineage, the history of the Guardians, the tales of a war that had been forgotten by the world but lived on in the hearts of those chosen to protect its balance. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols, intricate diagrams, and ancient script. Amelia could barely decipher them, but a flicker of understanding, a sense of familiarity, stirred within her as she traced the lines of the unknown language. Whisk, sensing her confusion, nudged the book with his paw, his emerald eyes focused on a particular page. Amelia, following his gaze, saw a picture, a drawing of a woman, her silhouette shrouded in a cloud of ethereal blue light. Beneath the picture, a single word stood out, "Ayla." "Ayla?" Amelia whispered, the name echoing in the room. Is this my grandmother?" Whisk purred, confirming her suspicions. Ayla, her grandmother, the woman trapped within the darkness, had been a guardian, a protector of the world's light. Her image, her story, was preserved in this ancient tome, and within its pages, Amelia believed, lay the key to freeing her. The book felt heavier in her hands, the weight of her grandmother's fate pressing upon her. She knew her journey had just begun. She was a guardian now, a protector, and the fate of the world, and her grandmother, rested on her shoulders. With a deep breath, Amelia began to read, her eyes tracing the intricate script, her mind absorbing the ancient knowledge, the stories of a war long forgotten, and a power she was only beginning to understand. The night stretched before her, filled with a weight of responsibility, the promise of adventure, and the burning hope of restoring a world that had been thrown into chaos. She was no longer just Amelia, the grieving daughter, but Amelia, the guardian, a warrior of light. The air hung heavy with a scent of ozone and fear. Amelia stood in the heart of her grandmother's garden, the once vibrant blooms now withered and brown, their petals shriveled like burnt paper. A swirling vortex of darkness, pulsing with malevolent energy, filled the center of the garden, a living manifestation of the Shadow Brood's power. Whisk, his fur bristling with anxiety, clung to her leg, his emerald eyes reflecting the swirling darkness. He meowed, a low, urgent sound, urging her to act. Amelia, her heart a drum in her chest, gripped the vial of blue liquid, her lifeline against the encroaching darkness. The voice of her grandmother, distorted and tinged with despair, echoed from the swirling vortex. "Amelia, my darling, please, help me. I'm trapped, consumed by this darkness." A wave of empathy washed over Amelia, engulfing her in a tidal wave of grief. Her grandmother, the woman who had been a beacon of warmth and love, was a prisoner of her own darkness. Amelia knew she had to act. She looked at the ancient book, its pages filled with intricate symbols and cryptic warnings. The book was a guide, a map to navigate the labyrinth of the Shadow Brood. She opened it, the pages whispering secrets in the wind, guiding her towards the path of liberation. "Whisk, I need your help," she whispered, her voice trembling. The cat, sensing her desperation, rubbed against her leg, his fur a comforting warmth against her trembling skin. He looked at the vortex, his gaze unblinking, his senses attuned to the ebb and flow of the dark energy. With a deep breath, Amelia focused on the blue liquid, channeling the ancient power that surged within. It felt like a living force, a powerful current flowing through her veins. The book instructed her to focus her power, to direct it towards the vortex, to create a bridge of light through the suffocating darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, Amelia concentrated, her mind becoming a beacon, her will a force to be reckoned with. A surge of blue energy erupted from the vial, swirling in a dazzling display of light that pierced the heart of the darkness. The vortex shuddered, as if struck by lightning, the dark energy swirling in a frantic dance. Amelia felt the power coursing through her, a burning river of light. She was the guardian, the shield against the encroaching darkness. She was the beacon of hope, the torch-bearer of the ancient power. Within the vortex, the form of her grandmother emerged, distorted and fragile, a flicker of light amidst the suffocating darkness. Tears streamed down Amelia's face as she saw her grandmother, a beacon of light in a storm of shadows. "Amelia, I need your help," her grandmother's voice was a whisper, fading in and out like a dying ember. Amelia held her breath, her focus unwavering. She had to fight, not for herself, but for the life flickering within the darkness. She pushed the blue energy forward, a relentless force of light, a wave of hope crashing against the suffocating darkness. The vortex pulsed, the darkness shrinking, its grip loosening. Her grandmother's form solidified, the light in her eyes returning, a spark of hope reignited. The book, sensing the shift in power, began to glow, its pages filled with runes that pulsed with an ethereal light. As Amelia watched, the runes on the pages started to form a new symbol, a symbol of unity, of hope. The book was guiding her, leading her towards the final step, the ultimate victory. With a surge of will, Amelia channeled the blue energy into the symbol, a beam of light piercing the remaining darkness. The vortex imploded, the dark energy dissipating, leaving behind a soft glow of light, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lavender and the faintest hint of rain. Her grandmother stood before her, weak but alive. Her eyes held the gratitude of a soul rescued from the abyss. "Amelia, you saved me, you saved us all," her grandmother whispered, her voice weak but filled with a profound sense of relief. Amelia, drained but exhilarated, felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. She had embraced her destiny, her power, and in doing so, she had saved her grandmother, saved the world from the clutches of the Shadow Brood. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The world, once unaware of the encroaching darkness, had been awakened to the threat. Now, Amelia, guided by her cat Whisk, by the ancient book, and the love of her. The air crackled with energy, the darkness swirling around Amelia and her grandmother, a vortex of black smoke punctuated by flashes of sickly green. Amelia, clad in her grandmother's old velvet cloak, felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she clutched the ancient book, its leather cover worn smooth with time. Its pages, now crisp with age, whispered tales of guardians and shadows, battles fought and lost, power and betrayal. Whisk, her cat, a sleek black silhouette against the darkness, meowed softly, his eyes reflecting the green flames licking at the edges of the vortex. He nudged her leg, his emerald gaze urging her forward. She knew, that this was the moment, the climax of their journey, a battle for the fate of the world. Amelia swallowed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She glanced at the vial of blue liquid, its contents shimmering with an inner light, a promise of power. This was it. She had to do this. For her grandmother, for the world, for herself. Taking a deep breath, she opened the book, its pages revealing a ritual, a chant, a sequence of gestures. She remembered the words, each syllable echoing in her mind. A legacy passed down through generations, a whispered promise that she, the last guardian, would stand against the encroaching darkness. "I stand before you, shadow brood," she intoned, her voice echoing in the cavernous darkness, her words charged with power. "As the last guardian, protector of the light, I challenge you, and your dominion over my grandmother, over this world." The darkness writhed, responding to her words, the green flames flickering with fury. The vortex roared, a chorus of tortured screams and guttural growls. But Amelia stood firm, her eyes blazing with a newfound strength, the blue liquid pulsing in her hand, a beacon of defiance. With a surge of power, she activated the ritual, her hand moving with practiced grace, her voice ringing with determination. She poured the blue liquid into the swirling vortex, the light it held merging with the darkness, forming a bridge of shimmering silver. The air crackled, the shadows recoiling, their green flames flickering and fading. "I command you to release my grandmother," Amelia shouted, her voice resonating with the power of the ancient book, the strength of her lineage, and the unwavering loyalty of her feline companion. The vortex shuddered, the shadows recoiling from the light, their power waning. Within the swirling darkness, a familiar face emerged, her grandmother, her eyes filled with fear and pain. "Amelia?" Her grandmother's voice, weak and raspy, echoed across the chasm of darkness. "It's me." Amelia felt tears sting her eyes. The relief, the joy, the overwhelming sense of victory. She had done it. She had rescued her grandmother. She had kept the promise whispered by the book, the lineage, the silent guardian at her side. The shadows, weakened by the light, began to dissipate, their green flames extinguished one by one, leaving behind a faint wisp of smoke that swirled and vanished into the darkness. Amelia, her grandmother finally free, felt the weight of responsibility lift slightly from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of triumph, a feeling of accomplishment. But the battle was far from over. The shadow brood, though weakened, was still a force to be reckoned with. They had been defeated, yes, but not destroyed. And they would be back. "Granny," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion, "we need to leave. The shadow brood will return, and we need to be ready." Her grandmother, still weak, but with a glimmer of her old strength in her eyes, nodded. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and grasped Amelia's. "You did well, my dear," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You are a true guardian." They turned, leaving the swirling vortex behind, the remnants of the shadow brood's power fading into the darkness. The blue liquid, now drained, glowed faintly in Amelia's hand, a reminder of the power she now possessed, a testament to the responsibility she now carried. Whisk, his emerald eyes gleaming with pride, padded beside them, his sleek black form a comforting presence in the still lingering darkness. As they walked towards the light, towards the world they had just saved, Amelia knew this was only the beginning. The battle against the shadow brood had just started, and she, the last guardian, with the silent, loyal companion at her side, was ready to face it. The air crackled with an energy that felt both ancient and terrifying. The sky above the old oak tree, where Amelia had stood just moments ago, was now a swirling vortex of darkness, pulsing with a malevolent energy. Her grandmother, her face a mask of agony, was trapped within its depths, her eyes pleading with Amelia for help. Amelia held the vial of blue liquid tight, its cool glass a stark contrast to the heat radiating from the shadowy vortex. The ancient book, its pages filled with archaic glyphs and warnings, lay open on the grass, its contents a guide for this terrifying ordeal. Each page seemed to hum with an energy that echoed the power pulsing within the vial. Whisk, her faithful feline companion, nudged her leg, a low purr rumbling in his chest. He sensed the danger, the palpable threat emanating from the vortex, but his eyes held an unwavering trust in Amelia, a silent encouragement to stand strong. Amelia took a deep breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to act, had to protect her grandmother, had to be the guardian she was destined to be. Focusing her gaze on the book, she began to recite the ancient incantation, the words forming a bridge between her will and the power within the vial. The air grew thick with energy, crackling and shimmering, as Amelia poured her entire being into the ritual. The shadows, sensing her defiance, surged forward, tendrils of darkness reaching out to engulf her. The heat from the vortex intensified, burning her skin, threatening to consume her whole. But Amelia stood firm, her voice resonating with newfound strength as she continued the incantation. A wave of blue light, emanating from the vial, surged forth, colliding with the darkness. The air crackled and hissed, the clash of light and shadow a battle for dominance. The vortex shuddered, the darkness swirling, as Amelia's light pressed forward, pushing back the encroaching shadows. She felt the power course through her veins, a torrent of energy that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The book, once a mere source of knowledge, now felt like an extension of herself, its pages whispering guidance, fueling her resolve. With a final surge of energy, the light broke through the darkness, a shimmering portal forming within the vortex. Amelia felt a rush of relief, a tear slipping down her cheek, as she saw her grandmother's figure emerge from the darkness. Her grandmother, weakened and pale, stumbled out of the portal, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. The vortex, having lost its hold on her, began to shrink, the darkness swirling and dissipating as the light from the vial extinguished its power. Amelia rushed to her grandmother, embracing her tightly. "You're safe, Gran. You're safe." Her grandmother, her voice hoarse but strong, looked at Amelia with pride. "You did it, Amelia. You are a true guardian." Amelia's heart swelled with a mix of relief and a newfound confidence. She had saved her grandmother, had faced the shadow brood and emerged victorious. But the victory was bittersweet. The shadows, though weakened, were not destroyed. They had tasted defeat, but they would surely return, stronger and more determined than before. Amelia knew that this was just the beginning, the first battle in a long and arduous war. She had been chosen, called upon to protect the world from the encroaching darkness, and she had answered the call. The burden of this responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she was determined to bear it. As the last vestiges of the darkness dissipated, Amelia looked at her grandmother, her eyes reflecting a newfound resolve. "Gran, I'm ready to learn. I need to be prepared for when they return." Her grandmother, her eyes mirroring the determination in Amelia's, nodded. "The path is long, Amelia, but you have the strength, the will, and the power to face it. We will fight together." Amelia looked down at Whisk, who rubbed his head against her leg, a soft purr rumbling in his chest. He had been her guide, her constant companion, through this terrifying ordeal, and he would continue to be her unwavering support in the battles to come. The world had been spared, for now, but the darkness still lurked, waiting for its opportunity to return. Amelia knew that she had a responsibility to protect her world, to stand as a guardian against the encroaching shadows. With a deep breath, she looked towards the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light upon the world. The battle had just begun, and Amelia was ready to fight. She was a guardian, the last line of defense against the darkness, and she would not falter. The air crackled with anticipation, a silent tension building as Amelia stood on the precipice of her destiny. Her grandmother, frail and pale, clung to her, a fragile vessel of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. The shadow that had consumed her, the shadow brood, pulsed like a malevolent heartbeat, the very air around them heavy with its sinister presence. Amelia felt the weight of the world, the burden of generations past, pressing down on her young shoulders. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had faced the shadow brood once before, had tasted victory, but this was different. This was the true battle, the culmination of everything she had learned, everything she had become. The ancient book, its pages filled with forgotten lore and warnings, lay open before her, the ink glowing with a faint, ethereal light. The vial of blue liquid, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness, pulsed in her hand, its energy resonating with the rhythm of her own heart. Whisk, her feline companion, always a silent observer, nudged her hand with his head, his emerald eyes burning with an intensity that mirrored her own. He had been her constant companion throughout this journey, a silent guide through the labyrinth of secrets and danger. He seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, the burden of the task before them. Amelia took a deep breath, her focus hardening. She would not falter. She would not fail her grandmother, nor the world that teetered on the brink of oblivion. This was her moment, her chance to prove her worth, to fulfill the legacy she had inherited. Closing her eyes, Amelia whispered the ancient incantations from the book, the words echoing in the air, their power vibrating through her very being. The blue liquid throbbed in her hand, a miniature sun within her grasp. Slowly, she poured the liquid onto the ground, drawing a sigil of power that shimmered in the encroaching darkness. It was a beacon of light, a defiance against the suffocating shadows. The shadow brood recoiled, its tendrils of darkness writhing and contorting, its power flickering. A groan escaped Amelia's grandmother, a sound of pain and desperation that pierced Amelia's heart. The entity that had consumed her grandmother, the essence of the shadow brood, was weak, its grasp loosening, but not broken. Amelia, fueled by a newfound resolve, raised her hands, channeling the energy from the book and the vial. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now blazed with a fierce determination. The room filled with a radiant light, the sigil on the floor pulsating with energy. Her own power, amplified by the ancient artifact and the blue liquid, flowed through her, a conduit of light against the encroaching darkness. A guttural roar ripped through the air as the shadow brood recoiled, its form twisting and contorting in a desperate dance of resistance. Amelia felt the entity's anger, its frustration, its fear. It was powerful, a force of nature unleashed, but it was not invincible. With a final, desperate surge of power, Amelia focused all her energy onto the sigil. The light emanating from it intensified, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The air crackled, the very fabric of reality seemed to tear as Amelia poured everything she had into the ritual. The shadow brood, its form swirling and shifting, let out a final, anguished scream. Its hold on Amelia's grandmother weakened, its tendrils of darkness receding, pulling back from her body like a defeated army. A wave of exhaustion washed over Amelia, but she pressed on, her determination fueled by the desperate hope in her grandmother's eyes. Finally, with a final burst of light, the shadow brood was expelled from her grandmother's body. Amelia fell to her knees, her strength spent, but her spirit soaring. The air cleared, the shadows dissipating, leaving behind a chilling silence. Her grandmother, pale but alive, lay in her arms, the terror in her eyes replaced by a mixture of gratitude and relief. The room was still, the air thick with the lingering energy of the battle. Amelia felt the weight of her responsibility, the knowledge that this was not the end, but the beginning. The shadow brood had been weakened, but not destroyed. It would return, stronger and more cunning, seeking to consume the world in its darkness. Amelia rose, her legs shaky, her body weary, but her spirit unbroken. She knew, with a certainty that resonated in her very core, that she would be ready. She was no longer just Amelia, the girl who lost her mother. She was Amelia, the guardian, the protector, the last line of defense against the encroaching darkness. She would learn, she would grow. The air crackled with a tangible energy, the scent of ozone heavy in Amelia's nostrils. She stood at the heart of a maelstrom, the remnants of the shadow brood swirling around her like a black, sentient fog. The air vibrated with a low, guttural hum, a symphony of malevolent power. Her grandmother, freed from the vortex, stood beside her, eyes filled with a weariness that spoke of years spent captive to the darkness. Amelia felt the power coursing through her, a surge of energy that matched the intensity of the storm around them. She was the last guardian, the last line of defense against the shadow brood's encroaching darkness. The vial of blue liquid, glowing in her hand, pulsed with a light that seemed to cut through the oppressive gloom. It was a weapon, a tool, a beacon of hope in the face of unimaginable evil. Whisk, her faithful companion, sat at her feet, his fur bristling, as if he too sensed the danger that hung in the air. He meowed, a low, guttural sound that seemed to echo the storm around them. She reached down and stroked his fur, offering him a silent reassurance, a shared understanding that they were in this together, facing a darkness that threatened to consume them all. Amelia, her grandmother's voice was a rasp, hoarse from years of silence. You must act quickly. The brood is weakened, but not destroyed. They will return, stronger, if we do not ensure their complete annihilation. Amelia nodded, her eyes fixed on the swirling shadows. She knew what she had to do. The ancient book, its leather worn smooth by centuries of use, lay open on the floor, its pages illuminated by the blue liquid's ethereal glow. It contained the final ritual, the ultimate weapon against the shadow brood. I understand, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. We must finish this. She looked at the book, the words etched in an archaic script she barely understood, yet felt deep within her bones. Each syllable resonated with power, a language older than time itself. She chanted the words, her voice echoing in the storm, summoning a force she barely understood, a power that pulsated through her veins, connecting her to the ancient lineage of guardians. The blue liquid shimmered, radiating a light that cut through the swirling darkness, illuminating the faces of both her grandmother and Whisk. She felt a surge of energy, a connection to the power that flowed through her, the source of her strength, the shield against the encroaching darkness. With a last word uttered, a wave of raw, unbridled energy burst from her, a torrent of power that tore through the remnants of the shadow brood. The air crackled and hissed, the black storm dissolving into a cloud of dust that settled around them, leaving only a faint, lingering scent of ozone. Amelia looked at her grandmother, her eyes filled with a sense of relief and wonder. The shadows were gone. The threat, for now, was vanquished. The world, for a brief moment, was safe. But Amelia knew that this was just the beginning. The shadow brood would return, their power undiminished, driven by an insatiable hunger for control. She had a responsibility, a burden she had accepted with a resolve born of fear and love. She was the last guardian, and she was ready to face the darkness. The world, unaware of the battle that had just been waged, remained oblivious to the looming threat. They lived their lives, unaware of the darkness that lingered just beyond the veil, waiting for its opportunity to return. Amelia, armed with the knowledge of the ancients and a vial of blue liquid, would be their shield, their protector. She would stand against the darkness, and she would not falter. Whisk, sensing the end of the immediate threat, rubbed against her leg, purring softly. He knew, as did she, that this was merely the first battle. The war was far from over. The air hung heavy, charged with the residual energy of the battle. Amelia stood, exhausted but exhilarated, her grandmother by her side, Whisk purring contentedly at her feet. The remnants of the shadow brood had been vanquished, for now. The vial lay empty, its power spent, and the ancient book, its pages worn and tattered, seemed to sigh with relief. But even as a sense of victory washed over them, a chilling whisper echoed in the back of Amelia's mind. The darkness had been pushed back, but it had not been destroyed. The shadow brood, like a shadow itself, could slither back into existence, its hunger for power undiminished. Amelia knew this was only the beginning, a first step on a long and arduous path. The world needed a guardian, a protector against the creeping darkness, and that guardian was her. Amelia looked towards the horizon, a determined glint in her eye. The fight had just begun. The silence of the old library was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Amelia, dressed in a simple black dress, stood before the bookcase, her hands resting lightly on the worn leather of the ancient tome that had become her guide. Beside her, Whisk, his emerald eyes gleaming with an almost human intelligence, rubbed against her leg, a silent reassurance. The battle against the shadow brood had left her depleted, her power spent. The vial of blue liquid, once a reservoir of unimaginable energy, now lay empty, a stark reminder of the price she had paid to save her grandmother and the world. She could feel the lingering echo of the battle within her, the raw, primal energy she had wielded, a power that now felt like a distant memory. Her grandmother, her spirit freed from the clutches of darkness, had become a guiding voice, whispering wisdom from the ethereal realm. "There will be others," she had said, her voice as soft as the wind chimes that hung outside. "Others who will feel the call, who will become guardians. The power is not lost, it simply sleeps, awaiting its rightful owner." Amelia understood. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. She was no longer just Amelia, the grieving daughter. She was a guardian, a protector of the world against an ancient and insidious threat. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the shadow brood would return. The clock chimed, each resonant chime a call to action. The library felt different now, infused with a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a witness to history, she was part of it. She had a role to play, and she had to be ready. With newfound resolve, Amelia turned to the book. It was more than just a collection of dusty pages. It was a testament to the resilience of the Guardians, a legacy passed down through centuries. Within its pages lay knowledge, secrets of the past, and a blueprint for the future. She spent her days immersed in the book, her nights filled with training. The library became her sanctuary, her battleground, the place where she would hone her skills, learning to control the latent energy within her, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Whisk was her constant companion, his presence a source of comfort and wisdom. He understood, perhaps better than she did, the gravity of the task before them. He had seen her transform, from a grieving daughter to a guardian, and he had watched her evolve into a leader, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in shadow. Amelia learned about the ancient guardians, the lineage that stretched back through time, their battles against the shadow brood, their sacrifices, and their triumphs. She learned of their powers, of the mystical rituals they used to access and control the ancient energy, of the strategies they employed to defeat the darkness. The book revealed the existence of other guardians, scattered across the world, sleeping, waiting for the call to arms. She knew that she wouldn't be alone in this fight, that there were others like her, others who would answer the call, who would rise to face the darkness. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Amelia, fueled by determination, immersed herself in the ancient lore, her body and mind becoming a vessel for the power she wielded. The library walls echoed with her whispered incantations, her every breath charged with the power of the guardians. She was no longer just Amelia, the grieving daughter, she was Amelia, the guardian, and the world was her responsibility. One day, a strange feeling, a tremor of energy, pulsed through the air. The library felt charged, vibrating with anticipation. She knew. The shadow brood was returning. She glanced at Whisk, who was curled up on a cushion, his eyes fixed on the window, a knowing glint in their emerald depths. He too felt the shift in the energy, the return of the darkness. She was ready. The world needed her. The battle had just begun, but Amelia was no longer alone. She had a book, an ancient power, and a loyal companion. She had a legacy to uphold, a future to defend. And with a deep breath, she stepped into the unknown, ready to face the darkness head-on. The world's deadliest creature was about to face her deadliest enemy. She was the guardian, the protector, the last line of defense against the encroaching darkness, and she would not fail. The world felt different now, cloaked in a quiet tension that vibrated beneath Amelia's skin. It was a stillness that spoke of impending storms, a calm before the roar. Even Whisk, usually a whirlwind of playful energy, moved with a newfound gravity, his emerald eyes reflecting the weight of their shared knowledge. The battle with the shadow brood had left a profound emptiness in its wake. The blue vial, once pulsing with power, lay empty, a silent testament to the fierce struggle. The ancient book, its pages filled with arcane symbols and cryptic warnings, whispered of the inevitable return of the brood, their tendrils reaching out even now, eager to reclaim their lost dominion. Amelia knew this was only the beginning. Their victory had been a fleeting respite, a temporary victory in a war that had raged for centuries. The world, she realized, was a battlefield, and she, the reluctant warrior, stood on the front lines. Days bled into weeks, then months, each sunrise a reminder of the looming threat. Guided by the wisdom gleaned from the book, Amelia spent her days in a relentless pursuit of knowledge, immersing herself in the ancient lore of the Guardians. She deciphered cryptic texts, practiced forgotten rituals, and unearthed the secrets of her lineage. Each day brought a new discovery, a new facet of her inherited power, and with each revelation, the weight of responsibility settled deeper within her. The world was vast and interconnected, a sprawling tapestry woven with hidden threads. Amelia learned of a network of guardians, their presence scattered across continents, their identities obscured by time and circumstance. They were her allies, united by a shared purpose, each guarding a piece of the ancient power, each tasked with thwarting the Shadow Brood's insidious advance. Whisker became her constant companion, her confidant and her guide. His sharp senses, honed through centuries of watching and waiting, became her most trusted source of information. He was an uncanny tracker, his keen instincts alerting her to subtle shifts in energy, the whispers of approaching danger. He often guided her to forgotten places, revealing hidden sanctuaries and relics of past battles, his presence a silent reassurance that she was not alone. But Amelia was not merely preparing for the coming battle. She was also finding her footing in a world she had never truly known. She learned to navigate the complexities of her newfound powers, the delicate balance between channeling and controlling the ancient energy. She found solace in the rhythm of the rituals, the chanting, the drawing of sigils, each action a tangible expression of her latent power. As her skills sharpened, so did her confidence. The fear that had once consumed her, the fear of the unknown, gradually transformed into a steely resolve, a determination to protect the world from the encroaching darkness. She embraced her role as a guardian, not with a sense of burden, but with a quiet pride. She was a warrior, a protector, a beacon of light against the looming tide of darkness. The day finally came when the quiet tension that had hung in the air for so long shattered. The earth trembled, a deep, primal tremor that resonated in the very marrow of her bones. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the sky turned a sickly shade of gray, and shadows stretched and contorted, taking on a life of their own. The Shadow Brood had returned. Amelia stood ready, her heart a steady drumbeat in her chest, her senses heightened. The world around her was a swirling vortex of darkness, but within her, a beacon of light burned bright, fueled by the ancient power and the unyielding strength of her purpose. She had waited for this moment, prepared for this battle. Whisker, as always, was by her side, his emerald eyes blazing with an ancient wisdom that seemed to pierce the veil of darkness. They stood together, a silent alliance forged in the crucible of their shared experience, ready to face the insidious threat that loomed over the world. Amelia knew this battle would be unlike any she had faced before. The Shadow Brood was no mere force of evil, but a force of nature, a primal darkness that sought to consume and corrupt everything in its path. But she also knew that she was not alone. The network of guardians, united by a shared purpose, would rise to meet the threat, each wielding their own unique power, each contributing to the collective defense of the world. Amelia raised her hand, her palm facing the roiling sky, a silent command to her fellow guardians. The world around her was dissolving into a canvas of shadow, but she saw them, their forms shimmering with a pale luminescence, their eyes reflecting a steely determination, a shared defiance. They were not just guardians, they were a force of light, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. The battle was upon them, a clash of light and shadow. The air hummed with an unnatural tension, the silence punctuated by the frantic chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The moon, a pale sliver in the Inkai sky, cast long, skeletal shadows across the verdant fields surrounding Amelia's cottage. The once serene countryside now felt charged with a foreboding energy, an anticipation of something dreadful. Amelia, perched on the porch swing, cradled a mug of chamomile tea between her hands, the steam swirling around her face in the cool night air. She stared out at the vast, star-strewn expanse, her heart a drum against her ribs. The battle against the shadow brood had left her depleted, both physically and emotionally. The echoes of the fight still lingered in her mind, a haunting reminder of the raw power she wielded and the terrifying consequences of its misuse. Whisker, her loyal companion, curled up on her lap, his emerald eyes reflecting the flickering glow of the moon. He seemed to sense her unease, nuzzling his head against her cheek with a soft purr that vibrated through her. His presence, always a calming force, offered a semblance of comfort in the face of impending chaos. The weight of her responsibility pressed down on her like a physical burden. She was the guardian, the last line of defense against the shadow brood, a force so ancient and malevolent that it threatened to engulf the world in darkness. The book, a treasure trove of knowledge passed down through generations of her family, provided her with glimpses into the history of this ancient war, a war fought on countless battlefields across civilizations both ancient and modern. She had learned of the guardians who came before her, their names whispered in hushed tones in the annals of the book. Heroes who had fought with unwavering courage and selfless sacrifice, who had given their lives to protect the world from the encroaching darkness. But their victories had come at a steep price. The ancient power, the source of their strength, was finite, and each battle had drained it further. Amelia knew that she was the last guardian, the last bastion of hope against the shadow brood. The power had been depleted in the last battle, and it wouldn't be replenished. But the book also spoke of a hidden power, a dormant potential waiting to be awakened within each guardian, a power that transcended the ancient source. A cold breeze swept across the porch, sending a shiver down her spine. It was a familiar feeling, a sense of impending doom, the same feeling she had experienced before the shadow brood attacked her home, before she had realized the true depth of the danger lurking in the shadows. She closed her eyes, picturing the battle, the raw power that pulsed through her veins, the terrifying rage that fueled her attacks. The memory was vivid, a searing reminder of the darkness she had faced. But she knew that was just the beginning. The shadow brood had been defeated, but not destroyed. They would return, their numbers swelling, their hunger for power insatiable. And this time, she would face them alone. The book had also provided her with a clue about the location of other guardians, scattered across the globe, waiting for the day the shadow brood would rise again. They were like her, individuals burdened with an ancient responsibility, descendants of a long-forgotten lineage, each a potential ally in the fight against the darkness. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She had to find them. She had to unite them. She had to learn to harness the hidden power within her, the power that transcended the ancient source, the power that could ensure the survival of humanity. The first step was to find the guardians. The book had given her a starting point, a cryptic map etched in its aged pages. The symbols, unfamiliar yet strangely familiar, led her to a hidden network of underground tunnels, a subterranean world of interconnected passages that stretched beneath the Earth's surface. These tunnels, she realized, were the lifelines of the guardians, connecting them across continents, allowing them to communicate and coordinate their efforts. Whisker, sensing her resolve, padded across the porch and nudged her hand with his head. He looked up at her with his luminous green eyes, a silent promise of unwavering loyalty. Amelia smiled, a flicker of warmth in the chill of her apprehension. She knew she was not alone in this fight. Whisker, her faithful companion, would be by her side, his keen senses and unwavering devotion an invaluable asset in the battles to come. The journey ahead was daunting. She had no idea what awaited her, no certainty of success, but she knew she had to try. For her family, for her grandmother, for the world, she had to fight. The weight of responsibility, the burden of her destiny, would guide her steps. The air hummed with anticipation, a low, barely audible thrum that vibrated through Amelia's bones. It was a feeling she knew well, the prelude to a storm, a tempest of darkness about to break. The shadow brood were returning, their insidious whispers crawling through the fabric of reality, a creeping chill that threatened to engulf the world. Amelia stood on the precipice of the old stone well, the same one where she had first confronted the shadow brood, her hands wrapped around the ancient tome. The worn leather felt warm under her touch, the inscription on its cover an intricate web of swirling lines and symbols glowing faintly. The book, her grandmother's legacy, was her guide, her lifeline. Her eyes, however, were fixed on Whisk, who sat perched on the edge of the well, his gaze fixed on the swirling darkness that was gathering in the sky. He was her partner, her confidante, and an extension of her senses. He had guided her through the labyrinth of ancient magic, his intuition a beacon in the darkness. His senses, honed by years of being a guardian, were attuned to the delicate threads of magic that weaved through the world. Whisk twitched his tail, a subtle sign of his growing unease. He knew what was coming. Amelia felt it too, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, a sudden tightness in her chest. She could almost taste the bitter, metallic tang of fear in the air. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the whispering wind. The tome hummed in her hands, its pages rustling with a life of their own, as if urging her to prepare for the impending battle. Whisk let out a low growl, his green eyes burning with a predatory intensity that mirrored Amelia's own rising anger. He understood the gravity of the situation, the threat to their world. They were not alone, however. Amelia had found them, the other guardians, scattered across the globe, each a beacon of ancient power. The tunnels, hidden beneath the Earth's surface, had led her to them, bringing them together for the inevitable showdown. The first wave of the shadow brood materialized from the swirling vortex of darkness, their forms shifting and twisting, their eyes burning with malice. They were grotesque parodies of life, their bodies warped and twisted by the darkness they served. Their movements were erratic, unpredictable, a chaotic storm of shadows that threatened to engulf everything in its path. But Amelia was ready. She drew upon the ancient power coursing through her veins, the primal energy that pulsed with a life force as old as time. The ancient symbols on the tome glowed brightly, and with a whispered incantation, she unleashed a torrent of energy, a wave of light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. The world around them erupted in a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, the battleground crackling with ancient energy. The other guardians, each wielding their own unique powers, joined the fight. Amelia fought alongside them, a whirlwind of light and fury, her movements precise and powerful, guided by the ancient knowledge etched within the tome. The air thrummed with a clash of energies, the world echoing with the sounds of battle. Amelia, fueled by her grandmother's memory and her own unwavering determination, fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She was no longer just a girl grieving the loss of her mother. She was a warrior, a guardian, a protector of the world. But the shadow brood were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. They swarmed around them, their shadows reaching out to suffocate the light. The battle raged, a maelstrom of darkness and light, and Amelia felt the weight of her responsibility crushing down upon her. This wasn't just a battle for the world. It was a battle for her soul. A fight to preserve the memory of her grandmother, the legacy of her family, and the hope for a future free from the encroaching darkness. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. Amelia felt her powers waning, her body aching from the strain. She could see the exhaustion in the eyes of the other guardians, the fear that threatened to consume them. But she couldn't give up. She couldn't let the world fall to darkness. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, her gentle encouragement fueling Amelia's resolve. And then, just when hope seemed to dwindle, a new energy surged through her veins. It wasn't the power she had drawn from the vial, but something deeper, something older, more primal. The power of her ancestors, passed down through generations, awakened by the sheer force of her determination. This power was different, raw and unrefined, yet exhilaratingly strong. It surged. The air crackled with anticipation, heavy with the scent of ozone and the murmur of countless unseen eyes. The sky, once a serene canvas of blue, was now a turbulent sea of swirling crimson, a portent of the encroaching darkness. Amelia stood at the heart of the chaos, her heart a drumbeat against the symphony of the encroaching shadow brood. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, a steady rhythm amidst the impending storm. This is not your war alone, Amelia. You are not the first, nor will you be the last to fight this battle. She looked around, her gaze sweeping over the other guardians who stood shoulder to shoulder with her, their faces illuminated by the crimson glow. Each one bore the mark of their lineage, a faint luminescence etched into their skin, a testament to their connection to the ancient power that pulsed within them. This was their inheritance, their burden, and their pride. Whisk, her feline companion, stood beside her, a silent guardian in his own right. His eyes, usually shimmering emerald green, glowed with a deeper, more intense luminescence, mirroring the encroaching darkness. He was a beacon of strength, a reminder of the resilience that flowed through their lineage. He was more than just a cat. He was her confidant, her protector, and her guide. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the shadow brewed, a tide of Inkai darkness, breached the veil of reality. Twisted creatures, grotesque parodies of life, surged forward, their eyes burning with malevolent hunger. Amelia felt the ancient power within her stir, a deep, primal energy that coursed through her veins like molten lava. The book, her grandmother's legacy, was a constant presence in her hands, its pages filled with ancient glyphs that whispered forgotten secrets and strategies for the coming battle. The air was thick with the scent of fear and desperation, but Amelia stood firm, a beacon of defiance in the face of the encroaching darkness. Her voice, a clear, unwavering tone, cut through the chaos. We are the guardians, and we will not yield. The battle erupted with the fury of a tempest, a whirlwind of magic and claws and teeth. Amelia fought with a ferocity that surprised even her, her movements fluid and graceful, fueled by an ancient power that coursed through her. She felt the weight of her lineage on her shoulders, the responsibility of generations past resting upon her. This was not simply a fight for survival. It was a fight for their legacy, a fight for the very soul of their world. Whisk, a blur of emerald and darkness, danced through the fray, his claws flashing with lethal precision. He was a predator unleashed, his movements instinctive and deadly, protecting Amelia from the unseen threats that lurked in the shadows. His silent presence was a constant comfort, a reassuring reminder that she was not alone in this battle. The other guardians, their faces etched with determination, fought with unwavering courage. They were a tapestry of diversity, united by their lineage, their shared purpose, and their unwavering commitment to protecting the world. They were the shield that stood between the encroaching darkness and the light. As the battle raged, Amelia felt a profound shift within her. The ancient power, once a foreign entity within her, felt like a familiar friend, a guiding force that whispered through her veins. She was no longer merely wielding it. She was becoming one with it, a conduit for its raw, untamed energy. She felt a connection to her ancestors, to the generations of guardians who had fought this battle before her, their courage echoing through her veins. Their whispers filled her with determination, urging her to fight with the same unwavering spirit they had shown. The shadow brood, their numbers seemingly endless, pressed their assault, but the guardians held their ground, their resilience fueled by the unwavering bond of their lineage. They were a symphony of chaos and grace, their movements a dance of death that repelled the encroaching darkness. The climax of the battle came with the emergence of the Shadow Lord, the orchestrator of this onslaught, a being of pure darkness whose form shifted and pulsed with malevolent energy. Amelia felt a surge of primal fear, a recognition of the sheer power that emanated from this being. But fear was a luxury she could not afford. Her responsibility to her lineage, to her world, demanded she face this threat head-on. With a roar of defiance, Amelia drew upon the full power of her lineage, the ancient magic flowing through her like a torrent. She raised her hand, the book held aloft, and channeled the power of her ancestors, the energy of generations past swirling around her. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembled, and the Shadow Lord recoiled as the force of Amelia's attack crashed against him. The battle raged, a dance of light and the air crackled with power, a storm of magic swirling around Amelia as she unleashed the full extent of her ancestral strength. The shadow brood shrieked in agony, their dark forms dissolving into wisps of smoke under the onslaught. Amelia felt a deep connection to the ancient energy pulsing through her veins, a primal force that resonated with her very being. This was her birthright, her destiny, and she would not falter. But as the last of the shadowy creatures dissipated, a new threat emerged, one more insidious and terrifying than anything Amelia had ever encountered. From the depths of the earth, a shadowy tendril, thicker than a man's arm, slithered out, pulsating with a malevolent energy that chilled her to the bone. The air grew thick with a suffocating darkness, and a guttural voice boomed, echoing through the battlefield. "You have tasted victory, child, but your triumph is short-lived. The darkness returns, and this time it will consume all."